Hey, one more thing before you go. Have you ever asked yourself how disease might have come as a blessing instead of a curse? I ask myself that all the time. Want to know how to clean your body to become a clear channel to receive guidance, aka how to make faster, wiser decisions? Stay tuned. We're going to talk to a holistic health practitioner who has been on her own journey of healing type 1 diabetes and found this methodology can help anyone with dis-ease with the tools for personal development and spiritual growth and more. I'm your host, Michael Hurst. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. Dr. Nikki Siso has a PhD in holistic health and nutrition and a master's in sustainability from Harvard. She's on a mission to support fellow diabetics and anyone with dis-ease, and we'll explain that as well. In seeing the condition as a blessing instead of a curse, she teaches the diet, lifestyle, and mindset needed to maintain balanced blood sugars and how to handle the triggers that lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms that raise blood sugars. She produces and hosts the podcast Legends, which we'll talk about here. Welcome to the show, Dr. Nikki.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you, Michael.
An amazing journey from what I've learned about you, from where you've come from and where you're at now, and how you help so many other people deal with a situation with their health that I think is kind of widespread, that is not typical just of the United States, it's all over the world.
Yeah, it's all over the world and something like 89 million diabetics in just America. So that's one in almost three. Wild to think
Yeah, that's
about.
pretty wild as well. Yeah, my father. I mean, I'm familiar with it from my stepfather had diabetes, and I used to remember at the breakfast table every morning he had his his insulin shot sitting on the. And I was young, so watching him stick himself in the belly all the time was kind of like, remembered. It was embedded in my brain, kind of a thing. But I started learning it at an early age, a little bit about diet from that perspective, and I know we're going to talk about that. But I'd love to start at the beginning. Can we do that?
Sure.
Where'd you grow up?
I was born and raised in England, and then my mother and I moved around quite a bit. I would, I would say the average is about every 2 to 3 years as a child that we moved. We moved from England to New York and then back to England and then to Florida when I was 9. So I lost the accent, as you can hear. But I moved around a lot. And one part of that is good because became very comfortable with being unstable in a way, right? The stability of being comfortable in change was implanted in me. And it created an interesting dynamic for me of always being the new girl. I always had to work hard to fit in and get people to like me right away. I was always the new girl, so I learned how to break the ice very quickly. So it actually implanted a lot of healthy techniques for me to use later on in life, which is now what I use a lot of my podcasts is breaking the ice with people and getting in and going really deep very quickly with people. So it ended up being in service. And I moved around my whole life. I continued that flow. My average now is about a year and a half. So I've had a very rich, exciting life.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, I think I read in some of your bio information that you've got 64 countries on your belt.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's that's cool. Actually, it's crazy cool that you were able to go to 64 different countries, the different societies and cultures that you got to live in and learn and kind of mingle with. I think it helps anybody that does that with a more diverse picture of food, for example, and how they manage their health. I'm assuming.
Yeah, there are so many ways to live, and we get to choose how we want to experience this lifetime.
Yeah, it's pretty slick. Do you have any brothers, sisters?
No, just me.
Just you.
Oh,
This works. I know your mother, if I may say this, your mother was the eighth child of a Holocaust survivor. How
yes.
did that affect you guys as you grew up?
Yeah, she didn't get her needs met as a child, right? So she had a lot of anger in her, a lot of uh, mistrust. The world is out to get her kind of sensation. And she brought that filter. with her wherever we went. If we're at the grocery store and or she's negotiating with at work, or it created these dynamics where she expected to be taken advantage of, and she's very quick to anger. And being the only child with not often having a father around, I absorbed a lot of that. Now, in her complete defense, that was not what she intended. She couldn't have loved me more. Gave me an incredible childhood. I got to go to private schools and boarding school in Switzerland, and she did everything she could to have given me a different childhood than what she had. Uh, and the way she was projecting her pain, I observed. Right? I experienced, and I ended up being hyper vigilant to, first of all, make sure that her needs are met so that she doesn't go into trigger state, and that everyone else's needs around her are being taken care of as well, because she could trigger them. And so I became very aware of everyone else's experience. And what I later in life realized is that I don't take care as well of my own needs. I'm taking care of everyone else's first. And I learned not to express my needs as well, because it might lead to a trigger, it might lead to an explosion. So I suppressed a lot. And so that's a lot of the work that I've had to do, is to uncover what that, first of all, to pour her pain out of my heart, because I literally absorbed her pain. And also to learn how to put myself first sometimes. I was called selfish if I did that, right? And I was told to stop crying, or I'll give you a reason to cry when I was crying. So my emotions weren't always welcome. And they resulted in my mother pulling back her love, not out of maliciousness, but she wanted to not advocate for quote unquote bad behavior. But I was expressing my emotions, and the reaction I got was love gets pulled away. So don't express yourself. It's not safe. Right. And a lot of these programs that we then adopt, and the belief systems that we then imprint in our subconscious of how to operate in order to stay safe. And these are the things that then lead to dis-ease in the body. Because if I can't express myself, right, then I'm suppressing, and I'm holding on to resentment in my body, and that energy gets locked in my body, and then the body can't function as well. And if I'm being a harsh inner critic, she was very critical. She was always making sure I did things her way. Again, not out of maliciousness, because she thought she found the best way, and so she was trying to support and guide, and right. But what happened is that I developed a very harsh inner critic myself. And so if I'm attacking myself in my brain, my mind, then my body will also start attacking itself. And that's one of the emotional components of an autoimmune disease, is the body is attacking itself. My immune system attacked my pancreas cells. It's interesting when you start to make these links of how we treat ourselves mentally and how the body then responds.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I grew up in a dysfunctional family myself. I had two alcoholic parents. So I understand your journey to a perspective, because both of them, I didn't realize the trauma that they had brought with them from their past lives. And I learned a new word a couple of years ago called intergenerational trauma, and how that's passed down from generation to generation. And once I started understanding that myself, I can attest to what you went through and are going through at times, because I've learned to do that myself. I think that it was brought to my attention because of my autoimmune disease. I like what you said about the fact that it can reflect into disease, no matter what it happens to be. Yours chose the pancreas. Mine manifested itself in rheumatoid arthritis. And I found that when I get angry, when I get depressed, I have flares.
Wow.
That kind of a thing. So,
where does it hurt most?
well, I have what they call polyarthritis, if you're familiar with that. So some days it'll be my right side, some days it'll be my left side, but mostly in my hands at the moment. My hands, my wrist are the ones that have the majority of the pain, and my elbows. Hands, wrists, and elbows.
So energetically, this might be very woo-woo for some, but it's fun to explore. Energetically, this is your hands are receiving. This is like giving and receiving, right? So
Mm.
is there a complex with receiving love?
I grew up with the same type of a mother. She was a single mother. My father died when he was very young. I was very young. We had a younger brother and an older sister. My older sister had moved out. She was the same way. My wife can tell you, I'd walk up to give my mother a hug, and she wouldn't even wrap her arms around me. So it was kind of one of those things where she'd go, love you, but only when it fit her need. And again, I understand where her, it took me a long time, it took me 50 years to really understand this, where her pain was coming from and what she was hiding in her seeking love that wasn't being fulfilled. Same kind of instance. And if she was reflecting that on me, and then the fact that I was the firstborn male. So, because my father was an alcoholic and died at 39, she was mad about that. So that got reflected back, and no matter what I would do, I never got the approval I was looking for. You
Mm,
know, and that. So I understand that journey to a perspective because have learned to understand how it how it reflects upon the way my body reacts.
yeah,
And if I
yeah.
start having conversations about like my mother and my father, and not in the Dr. Sigmund Freud manner, but you know, but in reality, we had a very tumultuous relationship, and it it contributed, I think, to my stress and my ability to manage that stress, to a certain perspective. So there are times that we'll start talking about it and saying, I don't want to talk about her because of that. Just to validate some of what you're saying from
Yeah.
another perspective, it absolutely, I believe that it has an effect on us, and it does it so in the form of manifesting a disease of this type.
Yeah, I like to say that every one of us, if we look at our lineage, our grandparents, great grandparents, someone along the line went through a Holocaust, a famine, slavery, uh, genocide. Somewhere is this atrocity, and then our brains imprint it because it gets passed down in childhood from 0 to 7. You're not really giving much. You're absorbing your
Yeah.
parents' way of operating in the world, and so you're absorbing that trauma in a way. I'm sad to say this, but it's almost like a faulty system. As genius as we are, we're imprinting ways of being that we
Yeah.
wouldn't choose as an adult. And then we have this lifelong kind of work of rewiring how we actually want to show up and what are the beliefs we actually want to adopt. And that's part of the work of healing the ancestral
Mm.
trauma, what I call it. Um, and that's part of the journey of being human, maybe, is being, but the blessing there is that I find that the people that have had the most trauma are the ones and the ones that have done the work to overcome it are the stronger, more vibrant, more resilient beings on this planet. The ones that had zero trauma whatsoever in their childhood, they're rare, but they're also very like, there's almost no emotional experience of like, it's so even keeled that I don't know. It's missing something. So you
Yeah.
can use it as your fuel. Is my point, and that's the blessing that I found with diabetes. And you pointed on something really important because I talk about type ones because that's my journey, but type 2 diabetics, they're using food as their coping mechanism. So it's the same concept of like dealing with stress and these inner beliefs and these dialogues within our brain that are not in service, and how do they respond to life's challenges, and what's the inner dialogue saying? Either everything they experience is an indication of them not being good enough somehow, right? Not good enough to receive love, not good enough to feel worthy, not right. There's so that we can create a long list of how we're not good enough, And I'll go back a little bit because I learned this at the Hoffman Institute. It was really potent and supportive. From 0 to 7, you need all of your needs met by someone else. All of it. If you're cold, you need someone else to get you a blankie. You can't even pick up your head, right? Especially as an infant, excuse me. And then as you grow, what happens is your brain actually interprets, it's designed to interpret everything as you take everything personally. So if I don't get my needs met, it means that I'm not good enough to get my needs met. And then the brain seeks evidence of your beliefs to confirm that they're true. And so you start going through life looking for how I'm somehow not good enough to get my needs met. And so this is the faulty wiring that I'm talking about, is that we create this, literally this program, like a software program that is searching for evidence of how we're somehow not good enough in this world. And imagine then the coping mechanisms that you also probably learned from your parents of numbing out with alcohol, right? Or eating foods, comfort foods, marijuana, whatever the numbing out agents are. Maybe it's just rage and like trying to push everyone away and get everyone out of your life to protect yourself. And cutting people off. That was my family's great technique. We just cut people off as soon as you get hurt.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. So these coping mechanisms, what I now have realized with diabetes has actually come to serve me as an emotional intelligence training tool, because how I respond to a high blood sugar will lead to coping mechanisms that don't do or don't serve me. So if I look at high blood sugars, I can think, wow, yet again, no matter what I do is not good enough, because I have a PhD in holistic health and nutrition. I eat very well. Like I snack on kale chips and red peppers, right? And my blood sugars still go up. Your cucumbers can make your blood sugars go up. It's a virtually impossible disease. I will say it is impossible to keep your blood sugars in perfect ranges at all times as a type 1 diabetic. Even the top performing, if you will, diabetics maybe get 92% in range. That means 8% of the day they're out of range. They're in unhealthy ranges for their body. How they respond in those times, most people, by the way, are somewhere between 30 and 70% of the day out of range. So how you respond to, wow, I failed at controlling my willpower, then that leads to, okay, well, if no matter what I do is not going to be good enough, give me the cookie, right? And then it can be a downward spiral very quickly of like, you're not in control, so feed me. I'm going to do what I want. Or if you lose your patience with your kids, for example, and then you get mad at yourself that you're not a good enough parent, right? And then you turn to alcohol, which skyrockets your blood sugars. So it all plays in. And so what I teach now is how to see diabetes as a tool. So when you do have a high blood sugar, what is the response instead? It would be to tune in, be like, oh, okay, what do I actually need right now in order to feel loved and satiate this craving for sweets when I'm not actually hungry? There's no physical hunger, but I'm craving the sweetness of life, or I'm craving some love. How can I give myself some self-love? Maybe I need a walk in nature. Maybe I need to call a friend. Like there are so many other coping mechanisms other than these like unhealthy things that are skyrocket your blood sugar.
Well, it's an amazing opportunity for us to understand how that affects us. The diet that affects us, the anger affects us, the depression affects us, the frustration can affect us, and obviously today's society and culture, we both know that, the I won't say addictive personalities, but the opportunity for us to eat unhealthy is very prevalent. It's there in fast food. It's there at the grocery store. It's there. People don't read labels,
Oh, thank
unless you have a disease of
you.
some type, or an autoimmune disease, or diabetes, or rheumatoid. People don't read labels,
Yeah.
and I think that that doesn't help either. On top of the external circumstances, my hands are moving, but you can't see them. External circumstances that are out there as well that are contributing to this. Can you help us? You mentioned type 1 and type 2 diabetes. My sister is pre-diabetic. My brother, his A1C, that's called A1C, at one point was like 1.5. They wanted to put him in the hospital to kind of bring it down. Could you help us understand a little bit the difference between type 1 and type 2 and what A1C is part of that?
Yeah. So type 1s, they say is genetic. And what the research I've done, there are seven causes that can lead to type 1 diabetes. Real quick, I'll go over adverse childhood experiences. There are 8 of those. You can Google those ACEs. Um, that often leads to alcohol use, which will kill off your gut microbiome and leads to type 1 diabetes, mold exposure, antibiotics use. Milk and wheat both have gliadin, or excuse me, wheat has gliadin, milk has casein. Both of those are proteins that will attach to your beta pancreas cells that produce insulin, tag them as the enemy, and your immune system will come in and take those cells out. So you kill off all the cells in your pancreas that produce insulin. And then the last one is a missing father energetically. So those are some of the causes that I've researched on type 1 diabetes, but they say it's genetic. Those causes are what kind of fill your cup that then make your body ultimately break down on the weakest link of your genes, which might be the diabetes in this case. Uh, that's often developed at 4 years old, but in my case, I got it at 29. So there is a late onset diabetes, and then type 2s is 100% lifestyle. It's incredibly easy to reverse. It does require changing your diet and your lifestyle, which might be the challenging part, but what you'll find is that you feel so energized and happy, and there your life will change when you start eating super healthy foods and you exercise and you just feel so good. That becomes the addiction. And so it's very easy to shift, and especially if you're pre-diabetic, that's your chance. Don't wait for a diagnosis. That is your diagnosis. Prediabetes is your diagnosis. It's your wake-up call that you need to make some changes because your body's really struggling with the way that you're operating.
Now, type 1 would require insulin,
Yes.
as in
Oh,
insulin
yes.
shots or pills or whatever
Right.
form that they come with, and then type 2 can be managed more with diet and so forth. How does the A1C play a factor?
A1C is the measurement of your average blood sugars over a course of 3 months. What it does is looks at the red blood cells, and there's actually a coating of sugar that will happen around the cells from having higher blood sugars. And based on the thickness of that coating is what your A1C number is.
That's really interesting. I found that even with my rheumatoid arthritis, I've eliminated sugar from my diets other than fruit and natural sugars type thing. If I introduce any type of cane sugar or white sugar or processed sugar or something along that line, I have a major flare that comes and hits me. So I think that even outside of diabetes, sugar I think is a kind of a villain.
Yeah, the cane sugars, and especially in baked goods, will make my sugars skyrocket, and it does. It's inflammatory. That's why you're struggling.
Yeah,
For rheumatoid arthritis, I understand that it's sugar, wheat, and dairy are the three
yeah,
most inflammatory things. That if you can get those three out of your diet, you should have a much better time.
100%. I've eliminated wheat, dairy, corn. I did this 24 years ago. When I first was diagnosed with this, I started eliminating those things from my diet. My doctor at that time is a rheumatologist. He said, "No, there's no scientific proof to that." I said, "But I feel better." He said, "Okay, well, if you feel better, do it." But there's no scientific proof to it. I mean, he re-emphasized that. But it changed my life. It kept me on a path of managing my disease at a point where I'm not having to put, Humira and Enbrel and, I can't remember the other one. They're nasty to be put into your system. They're almost like chemotherapy drugs. The Humira, every time I was getting Humira shot, it would burn, and I'd get a rash, and I'd get sick, and I'd be in bed for a couple of days. Same thing, Enbrel, I couldn't take it because it was poison.
Yeah, that's a sign of toxicity. If your body is puking or exhausted, right? That's a sign that you've
Yep.
toxified your body. It's not healthy for you.
Yep. Nasty stuff. And I mean, that goes across the board, even for if you can manage diabetes with tools in place to
Mm.
help you to understand how to manage your lifestyle from that perspective. It is a tough change, but there's a lot of new things out there for people. Even gluten free. There's a lot of gluten free options. That when I first started gluten free, somebody give me something gluten free, and it was like cardboard, no flavor, no nothing. But they've got so many things now that are available gluten free that it allows you to be able to enjoy what everybody else is enjoying. From
Yeah.
that perspective. Um, you yourself, I know that in you grew up in an environment where obviously you had to learn to come out of there to manage yourself. Um, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Um, I know in your notes on your website it says the first half of my life I partied hard. I just wanted to dance and free yourself from your inner critic.
Mm.
I kind of been there too from that perspective. How did you manage to kind of recognize what you were doing and how it was affecting your health, and what steps did you take to maybe move forward into what you're doing now?
Yeah. Interesting enough, I hired a success coach. I was living in Aspen and I wanted to figure out what my next venture would be. And he saw a twinkle in my eye when I said, I want to be the next Larry King live. I wanted to interview all the health and wellness experts in the valley. So the very next day, that just hit me really strong. I started Aspen Talks Health, and I started doing that. I started interviewing as many health experts as I could find. And then one Saturday night, I went out and I think I drank quite a bit, and we were recording on Sunday. And I could not remember my guest's name, and I had a really hard time listening to what they were saying and at the same time formulating a question. Like my brain was just so foggy. And it hit me right then and there that if I want to serve my purpose of elevating consciousness and serving humanity, this drinking is actually not working for me. And it was finding my purpose that led me to wanting to treat my body and my brain with greater respect. Fascinating. Yeah.
It,
So
it it is actually. I think that finding our purpose in life, even if it gets changed midlife, or I won't say necessarily midlife, at any point in your life that it changes, finding our purpose and our true purpose helps us to become better people
yeah,
and help those of us around us. So it's brilliant that you recognized that at the time.
thank you. Yeah, and it could be your purpose could be raising your children well,
Yeah.
right? It can be showing up as the best version of you. It doesn't have to be changing the world, but how do you want to show up every day? And if it's numbed out and checked out, you're not. You've got one life to live. Like I would hope that you choose to be present and really optimizing your this vessel. I mean, we are
Yeah.
magnificent beings, capable of really cool things if you get out of your own way and allow it.
I agree with that. And unfortunately life can change in an instant.
Mhm.
So it's valuable the time that you have here, and you got to make the best, like you said, make the best use of it because you never know what's around the corner. I mean, as a police officer, I can attest to that fact. Life can change in an instant. There were too many people that walked out the door and never walked back in, and I had to deliver a message that they weren't coming home. So it's
Ooh,
yeah. So it can change in an instant. To what you have on this. One more thing before you go. It's all about understanding purpose and that we have an opportunity to say what we want, have an opportunity to enjoy life, have an opportunity to tell the people we love them, that we loved, I'm proud of them, and have an opportunity to enjoy while we're here. We just have to open our eyes and grasp it
beautiful.
in that perspective. Um, so you went on as kind of, did you go on like a spiritual journey? How did you
I quit cold turkey.
go to?
I stopped altogether. I didn't touch any alcohol for 4 months. I even had really fun party friends come the next weekend to visit in Aspen, and I stayed sober and I got a glass of champagne. So a champagne glass, I put soda water and lime juice. So it looked like I was toasting and I was part of the celebration, but I wasn't getting drunk. And it worked like magic. I didn't feel like I was missing out. In fact, they all needed to go home sooner than I needed to because I was having fun and they got too drunk. So I learned how
Bonus.
it
Yeah.
actually can be a blessing. And what happens when you stop drinking is that you stop doing some of the things that you thought were so great before. And I didn't want to hang out in a bar anymore. And instead, I'd get on bed or at 8 o'clock and I'd start reading a book and educating myself and learning and growing. And it opened up this whole world to me of expansion and exploration that before I was just focused on kind of being free and freeing my mind from hypercriticism. And instead, I was like, no, I don't have to be so hypercritical. And I did the steps there. That required a lot of work. My favorite modality is breath work, but I went to retreats around the world. I've spent the last 10 years and almost $1 million on retreats and workshops and shamans and plant medicine and you name it. I've done it to support myself in healing my body. And the result is that I'm the most patient, balanced, aware version of myself. It takes a lot to trigger me now. I see everything with so much more grace and compassion and love. And I've calmed my nervous system so much so that now my blood sugars represent it too, right? That I stay much better in range because I'm not getting triggered. I'm not getting into this fight or flight mode from all the little things that happen throughout the day. So it takes a lot of work of healing the energetic work is, but my favorite honestly is breath work. If you haven't heard of holotropic breath work, it's a 3-part breath or into your stomach, into your chest, exhale. And you do that kind of rapidly for 45 minutes. Very important to do it guided. You can do it, you'll find a class, their classes are being offered all over the place, but you can also do it online, breathworkonline.com. They have a fabulous program. Uh, and it will get you into your subconscious like ayahuasca does. So the compound in ayahuasca that supports in getting you there is called DMT. Uh, and our brain actually produces DMT. It's what gets released right before we pass away. And you'll have a flashback of all of your life. And you can produce DMT when you do this series of deep breathing techniques. And what happens is you'll get thrown into your subconscious and get put where some part of your childhood or past that wasn't resolved. And you get to see it as an adult. And you're not reliving it. It's not this like anxious, crazy, horrible experience. You get to actually see it kind of from above and witness it and see and get a completely new perspective on that experience. Because as a 6-year-old little girl, right, or little boy, you had one frame of reference of like, oh my God, no matter what I do is not good enough. I'm not good enough, right? You have this programming working for you. But as an adult, you get to look back and be like, oh, no, that's not what your mom or dad intended. And you can reframe. And when you reframe these older beliefs, it's like a domino effect. All of the other beliefs, all the other evidence your brain collected over the years of how you're somehow not good enough, knock over. And you can step into this more empowered version of yourself because you realize none of that was true. It's all stories we made up. Stories I made up in my head that weren't ever serving. They served maybe in the childhood to protect me, to keep me playing safe and small. Like you play safe and small, you don't get hurt. But as an adult, you want to play big and make a difference in the world. Well, you got to get rid of this coping mechanism. You got to rewire it and choose a more empowered state version of you so that you can show up and serve your purpose and serve your children and stay patient and loving and grounded and empowered by your magnificence.
What an amazing opportunity for someone to take a reflection back on their life safely and to really kind of get a better look from the outside in. You know, I'm excited to look that up and try that actually from my
Yeah.
own perspective. Um, I
Breathworkonline.com. Powerful.
breathwork.com. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do that. I'll have to do that maybe tomorrow I'll try doing that. I got a couple more interviews today, so I have to do it tomorrow. Um, I don't want to go into another interview and I've got all these revelations and I'm crying. And
Sweet.
but yeah, that sounds like an amazing opportunity for someone to really go back and kind of check things out from that perspective. When I was on the job and as a cop, as a police officer, I was an investigative hypnotist, and the principle behind taking people back they were either victims or witnesses. Majority were victims to situations that were so traumatic that they blocked things out. The
Mm.
principle, just to kind of put it from another perspective so that people can also understand, we put them as an individual sitting in a chair. At back that time, we had VCRs. So we used a VCR. And the VCR was you can play it, stop it, fast forward, back it up, pause it, whatever the case may be, so you can see how safe you were and reevaluate what you were looking at that time and understand it's not going to hurt you. So
Mm.
the breath work sounds like an amazing opportunity for us to really reach down within ourselves and get a little deeper even than that. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you, thank
Yeah.
you, thank you. Um,
Yeah.
excuse me. So once you got into a point where you had learned so much, and I mean that's a lot of money and effort and time to put into, coming to a point in life where you can now help other individuals reach a point in their life that they can be helped. Because I think we all, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the majority of us, sometimes we're afraid to ask for help.
Huge.
Huge. I
Right.
think ask for help, but it's just as simple as taking the first step, right?
Yeah. And diabetes is very much a disease you kind of handle on your own. You don't get much guidance. I didn't get guidance from the doctors. I had to learn which foods, how much insulin I needed per bite. I was all a self-learning
Wow.
process. They teach you how to count carbs, but I shop at the farmer's market. I don't buy things often in boxes that give me the carb count, and that's not how I operate anyway. I'm not that calculated. And so, but what I've learned is that doing it on, and even more so than that, it's so shamed. I'm like ashamed of having diabetes. Most of my friends have never seen me take an injection, and I'm taking 8 to 10 a day.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just like I don't want to show how I'm faulty, or
Right.
defective, or right. There's shame around disease. And so we go through these things very much by ourselves, and we don't share the journey, the hardship. We don't want to be a burden on people. There's
Yeah.
all these like subconscious things that will make us feel like we don't want to be too much. And so what I love to invite is diabetics and anyone really struggling with the disease is to ask for support, because it will make it so much easier on you if you have support and camaraderie and other people going through the same thing, a coach guiding you so that you stay on track and you don't allow these downward spirals of thoughts that will really take you down, that again lead to really unhealthy coping mechanisms. So it's really important to ask for support, and guaranteed it will make your life better. Always. We
I
are a
agree.
community breed, right? We thrive. Our health is dependent on feeling supported and loved in a community.
I agree with that. We watched it. My wife and I watched this really interesting documentary on Netflix. And I always don't know if I'm pronouncing Dan Bowler's name correctly or not, but it was the Blue Zones.
Yes.
And it's an amazing documentary talking about the mind body soul connection, talking about the what you found. Everything you just said to me, you got a brilliant connection between mind, body, and soul, and understand how all of that works in conjunction with each other. That your mind, your body, and your soul have to talk to each other and come to a consensus that yes, we're going to do this, and yes, you can do this. Give you the confidence, the strength, the courage to be able to do what you're doing, what you're about to, embark upon, whether it's diabetes or whether it's rheumatoid arthritis or whether it's MS or whatever you're going through. you need to adopt that kind of thought process, I believe, and get a better understanding of that connection. But the one thing that really stuck out in our minds in regard to that was watching the people in Okinawa, Japan, and they had these little. I don't know if you've seen the documentary or not, but he had this. We talked first about the food and how they eat, how they get it, they farm it, they bring it in, and then how they enjoy the food. It's not scarfed. It's. Yeah, I'm an old guy. I still use scarfed from way back. It's enjoy the food, enjoy the people, have conversations. And then it was taking care of the community. So when somebody passed away, he followed these group of older women and men that went around to the people's houses where somebody had passed so that they weren't alone. And they helped them to clean, and they had sat and talked with them, and they had tea, and they had lunch or whatever the case may be, so that they weren't forgotten and that they felt part of somebody still. And they showed the importance of community and that we're all community, that we're all from the same source, and that we need to take care of ourselves as well as those around us. So at least what you just said to me, I think emphasizes what I watched on that program, is that we need to make sure that we are supported by community.
Yeah, it's so important. I will say, like I mentioned in the beginning, I've lived around the world, and I've never experienced this level of support and love and community like I have in Austin now. And it has elevated me into my highest version. I'm able to step into
Oh,
a leader here, and I'm allowed to be big and bold. It's celebrated here because the community wants to see it, and they're uplifting me. It's the most empowering thing and loving thing you can have is a supportive community.
I
It's
agree with
so
that. I agree with that. Even through my journey, uh, my listeners and viewers have heard this story before, but I did spend 4 years in a wheelchair, and I felt I was angry, I was depressed, I was resentful, I was you name it. That's what I was. I sat there, felt sorry for myself. I'd gone from 175 pounds down to 100 pounds. It was not good. I shut everybody out. So the importance of not shutting everybody out, like you had mentioned earlier, is really a fact. That the importance of being able to open up and accept people to come in and help you. My oldest daughter asked me what I said. What do you want for your wedding present? And she put. I still tear up. She put her hands on the arms of my wheelchair. She looked me square in the face and she said, "I want you to walk me down the aisle." And that, it. See, I still get emotional. It allowed me to recognize that I didn't want to be a burden. You mentioned this. This what brought this back as you were talking about this. We don't want to be a burden to those around us. We don't want to be a burden to those that we love. We don't want to be embarrassed by the fact that my wife had to, help me into the bathroom and get out of the bathroom or wash my hair when I needed to take a shower. She had to help me in that. It's humbling and it's embarrassing, but it took me a long time to understand that even if you look around you, you have community. In the community, you just have to look. You just have to open your eyes and look at those around you that are part of your community and just ask. Because there's people waiting there. There are people waiting there that want to help you.
it's true.
So,
It's true. I don't want anyone to go through the last 16 years I did completely alone.
see
Yeah.
that? And that's not good. Not when you have opportunity. Opportunity is golden.
Yeah. I didn't know you were going to make me cry, Michael.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm wiping tears. I'm wiping tears myself.
Oh, beautiful. Well,
um, you know,
yeah.
and it's a journey. It's they've been with me every step of the way. My family, my wife, my kids, my sister, my brother-in-law, my colleagues, my friends, and until you open your eyes and understand that you do have that community and there is support for you, there is an amazing feeling to get that support and to understand that you aren't a burden. They're there because they want to be. So just you got to look for it. That's all.
Yeah. So
Um, at what point in time did you kind of come to where you say, I want to take what I've learned, everything that I've done, all these countries that I have, these societies, these cultures, these practices, everything that I've done, I want to bring together, and I want to start helping others with helping through them through their journeys.
it's actually been quite recent that I've shifted to wanting to support diabetics in a strong way. I realize that there are very few doctors out there that have diabetes. So a lot of endocrinologists don't actually have the disease. They don't know the journey. They can support with the medications, and they can support with some nutrition coaching, more like carb counting. But they don't know the mindset version. They don't understand that I can teach someone what to eat all day long, but when they're triggered, they're not turning to healthy food to cope. And so there's a big component not being taught, and it's the most important part, I think. And then it's with that in mind, you can then again shift to seeing this as a blessing. So I've been supporting people dabbling here and there for the last 4 years, just sharing some insights on Instagram and TikTok. But it's only been in the last few months that I've really honed in on wanting to support diabetics in this journey and creating this opening for them to see it as a blessing.
So did you? I know you have a podcast called Legends.
Yeah.
It's an amazing podcast. I've listened to it, several episodes. In fact, my wife's got a few in her queue for Spotify. So you can listen on Apple and Spotify, whoever out there is listening. But listen to this one first, please. But you have amazing guests on there. What was your inspiration for this particular podcast? What do you do? And kind of I could try to explain it, but you really empower people within this with knowledge, and you kind of educate people and you inspire people and so forth. Can you tell me about how? Let me try that in English. Can we talk about that?
Sure. So legends, I basically I interview legends, right? I find amazing humans. I'm very blessed to well, I take advantage of life. So I go to 3 to 5 events a week. So I'm always meeting incredible people. And then I bring them on the show, and I like to dig in their brain and get juicy nuggets of wisdom on how they stepped into their highest version. So that's what the show is all about. What was their journey to to shining, to allowing themselves to play a bigger game, and to what are the techniques and tools and all the different things that modalities that they may use and now are used in service of their clients, so that they can use this lifetime in the greatest service. That's my big thing, is how do I use all of my unique talents in service of the greater good. And that's always been my driving force, and that's what most of my guests are like that. And it's very broad. In one morning I interviewed a shaman that served ayahuasca to presidents. To that, the second interview was an AI expert on how to use AI to build a coaching business, right? And so you can share your message and create more of an impact using AI, and it's phenomenal tools. You can do all sorts of market research with it. And then the third person was a tantra coach, all about intimacy and connection and how to relate to your partner. And so it's very much across the board, with the overarching umbrella of like, how do we use this life to shine our brightest and have the best life experience that we can.
That's an amazing. That's a and we align a lot. Believe it or not, this podcast, One More Thing Before You Go, was also inspired by my oldest daughter. And it is an opportunity to do the same thing: inspire, motivate, and educate. Is how we try to bring people like you on here that have such a journey that contributes to society in such a positive way and manner that you elevate people to a different level, which I'm grateful. So again, thank you. I'm not done yet, but thank you very much still again for being here.
Thank you.
We with your with what you're doing now to help people in regard to like managing the diabetes and managing, if they've got, as you said, or any dis-ease. And I just to let everybody know out there, when I say dis-ease, I've used that terminology in the past, but you have it in your notes as well, DIS with a dash ease, because I think that well, how about, can you explain that? I think you
Yeah.
probably would explain it better than I explained it. I understand it because of conversations, but can you help us all understand what dis-ease is when we're dealing with something like this?
Yeah. Disease, as it's usually spelled, has a connotation of flawed almost. There's a, I don't know if that's the right word, but disease, like it feels gross. It doesn't feel right. But what the truth of dis dash ease is that there's dis-ease in the body. And so the body's not operating optimally, and you've created a state of dis-ease. And what that does is when you separate those two words, you actually become more empowered because you have the opportunity to create ease in your body. It's often related to detoxifying because we're so bombarded by toxins in our world now. They come in, there are 100,000 chemicals that the EPA has approved. Many of them are being used in our foods. We're directly absorbing them, or we're lathering our skin, spraying our hair, cleaning our houses with, so we're breathing it in. Their toxicity comes in many ways and creates dis-ease, or it's food based, like you were stating earlier, inflammatory style foods, or they're actually adding chemicals or addictive style chemicals into our foods to create the addiction. And then preservatives that are used to have foods stay on the shelf for 2 years. Oh, so there's many things in our world that create a state of dis-ease, and that's not even mentioning the mental side, right? Where we're creating our own state of dis-ease with our thoughts. So when you see dis-ease that way, I like to see it that way because then there's an opportunity for me to create a change and create the ease that I'm desiring. And you can do that. The body is designed to heal. It wants to show up optimally. We're constantly healing. That's what the body does. It heals broken cells, it repairs, it's always replenishing. That's what it does. And so we just have to support it with getting the toxicity out and putting the proper nutrition in, and then supporting our mindset and our mental thoughts. Those three areas will make a massive impact, and you'll move from disease to a state of ease.
Yeah, what brilliant! You did it so much better than I would have.
Wow.
I could just say, "Hey, it works." Yeah, it's interesting how in understanding what you just said, it sounds to me like a lot of the root causes of disease, or just about everything that you just said. It comes from the food. It comes from the stuff they put in the food. Which, if anybody's out there watching, you should watch a documentary called "Poisoned." Yeah, it's. I think it's on Prime. Might be on Prime or Netflix, but it's called Poisoned, and it really goes behind the scenes and in depth with the food and what they're putting into it, why they're putting into it, why they're getting approved, and it's just bizarre what people put it. Eat organic, and eat clean. Eat box food, canned food, that kind of stuff. I don't eat boxed food. I don't eat canned food, and my body reacts better for me
Yeah.
from
We're
that
designed
perspective.
to eat what grows out of the land, right? That's why we have hands that pick fruits and vegetables. We are designed to consume the products that are natural to this environment. And if they've been processed and chemically treated and if they have preservatives, imagine. So things that are sitting on a shelf for 2 to 3 years have been designed so that nothing in nature will break it down. You put an apple on your shelf, it will break down eventually. Nature naturally has this,
Right.
right, decomposing part of it. And so if it's not breaking down, that means it's designed for nothing in nature, bacteria, in other words, to break it down. Well, our guts are full of bacteria. That's how we break down food. And so
Yeah.
we're eating foods that have been designed for bacteria to not break it down. Of course, we're still hungry. We're not getting nutrition,
That
right? So
yeah,
shop at the farmers market is my trick. Don't
farmers
shop at.
market. Yes,
Yep.
farmers market where you need to go. Do you think with that, with changing your diet and understanding the root causes of so many things, including mentally, past trauma, diet change and things like that, that we can reverse the type 2 or manage the type 1 diabetes?
100%. Yeah.
100%.
Type 2 very quickly, within a few weeks, can shift their can shift their condition.
Now, what's the difference between type 2 and pre-diabetic?
So pre-diabetics, their A1Cs aren't higher. So once you pass, I don't know, remember the exact number. I think it's 6.
5.
But if past 5, okay.
I just
If
had
you're
mine done. 5.
Okay, if you're past that mark, then they will diagnose you with diabetes. If you're very close to that mark, they'll say you're pre-diabetic. You're getting
Pre-diabetic.
close. So your sugars, your blood cells are showing that there's more sugar on there than it should have.
Oh, that's interesting. Um, do you have any tips, or what is the first step somebody should take if they feel that they might be pre-diabetic or diabetic, or signs and symptoms or something that would indicate that they need to go have something checked?
Yeah. So exhaustion is the first one. If you're feeling tired or lethargic, especially after eating, you're not eating the right things. That's number one. And I experienced that right before, about 2 weeks before I got diagnosed. I was just dragging, literally dragging my feet. Then eyesight is a big one. My eyesight actually went out. Everything got very fuzzy because the capillaries in your eyes are super small, and what happens when your sugars are high, your capillaries get shrink, and so it became very hard for me to see. Thirst, excessive thirst is another one. If your blood sugars are high, you can't hold on to water. So I was drinking a gallon of water, peeing every 10 minutes, and still needing more water. That's a big one. And I think those are the main three, but the exhaustion and the thirst are the biggest cues.
Those are excellent, excellent opportunities for you to recognize that you might need to go get checked, and it's important too because at a certain point, diabetes can be detrimental to your health in so many other ways. Not only can it kill you, I mean, ultimately, but I think people have lost toes and extremities and fingers and things like that because of it. Correct?
Yeah, most people don't die of diabetes; they actually die of heart disease,
Heart disease.
but
Ah.
it's the same causes. So it's a high fat, high sugar diet. The fat will line the arteries, and so you end up with heart disease. Will get you first before diabetes will,
Oh, man.
but it's all
Cool.
diet related and
All
same
diet
causes.
related.
Yeah.
Well,
And then to answer your other question about what's the first thing they can do, if you're like ready to really make a change in your life, the best thing you could possibly do for yourself is go through a juice cleanse. If you can do a 10-day juice cleanse, you will clean out your system. And what happens is you reset your taste buds, and you will clean out a lot of the excess fat and a lot of the chemicals, the toxicity that's built up in your body. And then when you do start eating, every bite you take, you will know whether or not that is good or not good for your body, because you get hypersensitive, and then you can make much wiser food choices. But when you're loaded with toxicity, you can't tell. It's like a smoker. They can smoke a pack a day. Well, they couldn't do that when they first started. The first cigarette you take will put you on the floor, but then the body learns to build up this toxicity resistance, and it can handle larger amounts of toxins so that you don't die right away. Otherwise, you would die. So, juice cleanse, a detox, is an incredible way to really jumpstart your healing, and then create you become more in tune with your body, and you'll start to learn how to listen to the cues for your body, or what's working, what's serving you, what isn't.
brilliant. Amazing. I always ask one more thing before you go. Wisdom. You may have just said it, but I'm still going to ask you. How can somebody find you if they want some help?
So Dr. Nikki Siso at gmail.com is easy. I have my website, wakeupwithnikki.com. If you put /diabetes, that will take you to the diabetes page. And then if you follow me on TikTok or Instagram, those I post a lot of fun things, especially TikTok. It's at Dr. Nikki _diabetes. I post a lot there for diabetics. On my Instagram, it's more for just general mindset insights, and that's at Dr. Nikki Siso.
And your podcast can be heard on Apple and Spotify. It's called Legends. It's got a bright green artwork, so it's easy to locate. Again, I want to thank you very much for sharing your journey with us and for educating us and inspiring those individuals, I think, to kind of take a better look at themselves and hopefully improve their lives from that perspective and motivate them to make that change. So, thank you for being here.
Michael, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you.
Now, I'm going to ask that question. This is one more thing before we go. So before we go, do you have any words of wisdom?
Yes, be kind to yourself. I think we are so quick to be judgmental and harsh. And the best thing you can do for your body and for yourself and for your mindset, for your life, for your happiness, is to just be kinder to yourself. Be a little more self-loving. Give yourself grace. This human journey is challenging, especially with disease. But before that, it's a challenging experience. So be kind, be graceful. We're all gods in training. Yeah. That's my favorite term.
Amazing and brilliant words of wisdom. Thank you very much. Again, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing everything with us, your wisdom and your journey. I look forward to another conversation next year, maybe. And so thank you.
Thank you. What a blessing. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Everyone out there that's listening and watching, one more thing before you go from my perspective, have a great day, have a great week, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go. Check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.